You were taught that the great maps of the empire were a triumph of discovery, that they brought the dark corners of the world into the light of knowledge. That was a lie. The maps did not illuminate, they erased. To be mapped by the empire was to be condemned to oblivion. Before we unfurl these forbidden charts, understand the territory you are entering. This channel is not for tourists. It is for those who understand that a map is not a description of the world, it is a claim of ownership. And the first act of owning something is to erase its previous name. If you are not prepared to see the blank spaces where entire worlds used to be, then fold your map and go home. But if you have the courage to witness the true, silent process of conquest, then subscribe. Show us you are ready to see the real map. The grand imperial cartography project of the 18th century was not an act of exploration. It was the most profound and subtle form of conquest ever devised, the science of cartographic extinction, a way to destroy a culture, a people, a history, not by burning their books or leveling their cities, but by redrawing their borders until they simply fell off the edge of the known world. Our story begins at the height of a vast and powerful empire, which had a problem it could not solve with the sword: the jungle highlands of the southern continent, a place of ancient, unconquerable tribes whose cultures were so deeply woven into the land itself that they were impossible to pacify. So the emperor turned to a new kind of soldier, not a general, but a geographer, a man who promised that if he could not put the highlands on the map, he could wipe them from it. He founded the Royal Cartographers Guild. They were not artists. They were silent, scholarly executioners. The high priest of this silent conquest was a man known as Lord Malachi Vane. He was the royal geographer, a title that belied his true function. He was a man whose face seemed etched by the sharp lines of longitude and latitude, whose eyes held the cold, vast emptiness of a blank map. He saw the world not as a tapestry of cultures and lives, but as a collection of chaotic, uncategorized data points that offended his sense of absolute order. A tribe that had no written name on an imperial chart, a river whose course was known only through local legend. These, to Vane, were not just unknown, they were illegitimate. They were errors in the grand design, waiting to be corrected, and correction in his lexicon meant erasure. His chief instrument was not a sextant or a compass, it was the ink. The guild's ink, known in their secret ledgers as Sepia Umbra, was a thing of alchemical terror. It was created in a sealed chamber beneath the guild hall. Its ingredients were the dust of other long-conquered cultures, the powdered bones of forgotten kings, the ash from the burned libraries of fallen cities, the ground-down stone from the shattered idols of dead gods. Every line drawn with this ink was not just an act of cartography. It was an act of imposition, of overwriting a living culture with the dust of a dead one. The parchment they used, the Vellum Anima, was prepared from the skins of animals raised in already pacified territories, lands where the process of erasure was long complete. The Guildhall itself, the Sanctum Cartographica, was a temple to this philosophy. It was a silent, soaring library, its walls lined with thousands of maps, each one a testament to a world made clean and simple. At its heart was the revision room, a circular, sterile chamber, lit by a cold, clear northern light from a high crystal dome. In the center of the room stood the great table, a single, massive slab of polished obsidian, upon which the final, official maps of the empire were drawn. The silence in this room was absolute, a pressure on the ears. This was the place where worlds ended, not with a bang, but with the silent, precise scratch of a pen. Into this sanctum came a young man named Rhys, a cartographer of prodigious, brilliant talent. He had been recruited from the provinces. He worshipped Lord Vane as a living god. He believed he was joining a holy mission to bring the light of imperial knowledge to the world. He saw the beautiful, precise maps as the ultimate art form, the triumph of reason over chaos. His journal, filled with the fervor of a true believer, chronicles the beginning of his indoctrination. March 17, 1752. I have been accepted. I walk the halls of the Sanctum Cartographica today. The silence, it is not an absence of sound, but a presence of pure, perfect order. Lord Vane himself reviewed my work. His eyes are like a surveyor's tools, seeing every flaw, every imprecision. He spoke of our work not as map-making, but as bringing the world into conformity with its ideal self. To work here, to draw a single line on the great table, is to touch the mind of the empire itself. I feel I have finally found my true purpose. Rhys was first assigned to the archives tasked with collating and clarifying the field reports from the jungle highlands. He read the raw, chaotic accounts from soldiers and surveyors. They were filled with the names of tribes, the Sundrinkers, the children of the Green Viper, and descriptions of their vibrant, complex societies. He then saw how this raw data was processed by the senior guild members. The tribal names were struck out, replaced with simple geographic designators. Hill Sector 7, River Basin 4A. The complex cultural descriptions were reduced to a single line: subsistence-level animists, hostile. Rhys saw this not as erasure, but as clarification. The messy, anecdotal world was being translated into the clean, objective language of the Empire. He was proud to be a part of it. He did not yet understand that he was learning how to write an obituary. Rhys's talent quickly propelled him from the archives to the revision room itself. His hand was unnaturally steady, his eye for detail perfect. Lord Vane began to groom him as his successor, giving him the honor of drawing minor, pacified regions onto the Great Table's master map. Each line Rhys drew with the Sepia Umbra ink felt like a sacrament. He felt the weight of the Empire in his hand, the satisfaction of bringing a piece of the world into its final, perfect form. The first crack in his faith came with the mapping of the Whispering Valley. The field reports described it as the sacred heart of the Sundrinker tribe, a place of immense spiritual significance, filled with ancient, carved stones that, the reports claimed, seemed to hum in the twilight. In the guild's methodology, this was a site of significant cultural contagion that needed to be neutralized. Lord Vane instructed Rhys on the process. "We will not draw the valley, Rhys," he explained, his voice a low whisper in the silent room. "We will undraw it. You will trace the cartographic null zone. The river that feeds it, we will reroute it 2 leagues to the north on the map. The mountains that surround it, we will raise their elevation, rendering the valley a cartographic and climatic impossibility. And the valley itself, you will cover it with the symbol for impassable swamp. It will be as if it never existed. The land will follow the map. The truth will conform to the ink." Rhys, for the first time, felt a flicker of doubt. This was not clarification. This was a lie. But his faith in Vane in the guild's mission was too strong. He told himself it was a necessary fiction, a way to pacify a hostile region without bloodshed. He picked up his quill, dipped it in the dark, heavy ink, and with a steady hand, he erased a people's soul from the world. Weeks later, a new surveyor's report arrived. It was a confused, panicked dispatch. The surveyor, sent to confirm the new topography of the region, had found the Whispering Valley desolate. The river had indeed changed its course, as if by a phantom earthquake. The valley floor was now a stagnant, malarial swamp. The ancient, humming stones were silent, half submerged in black, foul-smelling water. The Sundrinker tribe, their sacred land destroyed, had simply vanished, their spirit broken. The report concluded that the surveyor must have made a catastrophic error in his initial readings. The swamp had always been there. The valley was just a local myth. Rhys read the report and the world tilted. The ink was not a representation. It was a command. The Vellum Anima was not paper. It was a sensitive, living membrane connected to the world itself, and the Sepia Umbra was the tool that rewrote its very DNA. The guild did not just make maps. They performed a kind of geographical surgery on the living body of the earth. He began a secret, terrifying audit. He would stay late in the archives, comparing the old pre-guild maps with the guild's final, perfect versions. He saw it everywhere. A thriving coastal culture of fisherfolk, described in a dozen mariners' logs, replaced on the guild map by a sheer, unassailable cliff face. A generation later, naval charts confirmed the existence of the cliff. A nomadic tribe whose culture was built around a vast, migratory herd of deer, erased by the simple act of drawing a new, impassable mountain range that cut off their ancient migration path. The herd died out. The tribe starved. The map was now correct. His journal became a frantic, whispered confession, the record of a man discovering that his entire life's work, his art, his faith, was a lie built on a foundation of silent, ink-and parchment genocide. August 10, 1752. It is a weapon of absolute retroactive power. We do not just kill a culture. We make it so it never existed at all. We are not cartographers. We are murderers of memory. Every line I have drawn has been the stroke of an executioner's axe. Lord Vane is not a geographer. He is a god, a cruel, tidy god who is pruning the chaotic garden of the world according to his own sterile design. And I have been his most faithful and most damned apostle. Rhys knew he could not fight Lord Vane directly. To challenge the guild was to challenge the Empire's very definition of reality. He could not destroy the maps. They were the most heavily guarded artifacts in the capital. His only path was to use the guild's own weapon against it. He had to create a map so powerful, so fundamentally true in the guild's own arcane science, that it could not be erased. He had to map a rebellion into existence. His target was the very heart of the system, the Great Table itself. He knew from his studies that the massive obsidian slab was not just a drawing surface. It was the focal point, the anchor that amplified the power of the ink and parchment, broadcasting their commands across the globe. He also knew its one secret vulnerability. The obsidian had been mined from a dormant volcano in a distant northern province, a place with a unique geomagnetic signature. Any material from that same region, he theorized, would have a resonant sympathy with the table, giving it an amplified, undeniable reality when used in the revision room. Rhys began his quiet, desperate work. He used his authority as a senior cartographer to requisition, surveying supplies for a supposed mission to the Northern Territories. What he really sought was a specific kind of stone, a rare, iron-rich lodestone found only in the caldera of the same volcano that had birthed the Great Table. He also gathered stories. He secretly met with the last, exiled survivors of the cultures the Guild had erased, men and women living in the capital's slums. He listened to their songs, their histories, their true names for the mountains and rivers the Guild had renamed or undrawn. He was gathering the ghost data of a dozen murdered worlds. He spent months in his locked quarters, grinding the lodestone into a fine magnetic dust. He mixed this dust with a binder of his own creation, a clear varnish made from the sap of a hardy, resilient weed that grew in the cracks of the city's cobblestones. He was creating a new kind of ink, not an ink of erasure, but an ink of indelible, defiant memory. His final act was one of supreme, terrifying risk. One night, during a rare planetary alignment that, according to Vane's own esoteric texts, left the Great Table in a state of receptive flux, Rhys broke into the revision room. The vast chamber was silent, the obsidian table gleaming under the cold starlight from the crystal dome. He did not try to alter the master map of the Empire. He began to draw on its empty spaces, its margins, the vast oceans and unexplored continents, but he was not drawing new lands. Using his new magnetic ink, he began to draw the ghosts. He drew the true winding course of the river that had been rerouted. He drew the sacred valley that had been turned into a swamp. He drew the ancient migration paths, and he gave them their true names, the names he had learned from the survivors. He was not creating a new map. He was restoring the old one, right on top of the new. He was mapping the memory of the world back onto its sterile, revised reality. He called it the ghost map. This is the turning point, the moment of supreme intellectual rebellion, when the student uses the master's own terrible science to undo his work. If you understand the profound power of this act, the remapping of truth onto the face of a lie, then make your declaration. This is a story for those who believe in the enduring power of memory. Hit the like button, subscribe, the ghosts are about to be awakened. As Rhys drew the final line, the ink made from the sacred lodestone resonated with the obsidian of the Great Table. A low, deep hum, the sound the sun drinkers had claimed to hear from their sacred stones, filled the room. The ghost map did not look like ink on a surface. It began to glow with a faint, silvery light, its lines seeming to float just above the official map, a second, spectral layer of reality. The next morning, when Lord Vane and the Guild members entered the revision room, they froze. They saw the impossible, a map that could not be undrawn. Its magnetic, resonant ink was so deeply attuned to the table's own essence that any attempt to erase it would risk shattering the table itself, the source of all their power. Rhys had created a cartographic paradox, a permanent, undeniable record of their crimes, embedded in the very heart of their sanctum. Lord Vane looked at the glowing, spectral lines, at the names of the worlds he had murdered, now returned to haunt him. He had been so obsessed with creating a perfect, clean map, he had never imagined someone would find a way to map the stain. The ghost map was a silent, permanent scream in the heart of the Empire. Lord Vane and the Guild were paralyzed. They could not destroy the map without destroying their power, yet they could not allow its truth to be seen. The revision room, once the nexus of their control, became their PR. Ison, it was sealed, declared a sacred space too holy for any, but the master of the Guild to enter. Vane spent the rest of his days as the sole jailer of his own crimes, forced to look upon the glowing, spectral record of the worlds he had erased. Rhys was immediately arrested, but he could not be executed. He was the only one who understood the arcane science behind the ghost map. To kill him would be to lose any hope of ever understanding, and perhaps reversing what he had done. He was imprisoned in the highest, most isolated tower of the Guildhall, given parchment and Vane's own alchemical ink, and commanded to find a way to correct his work. He became a prisoner of his own rebellion, forced to study the weapon he had created. But the effect of the ghost map was not confined to the sanctum. The Great Table was an amplifier, and it was now broadcasting a new signal, a signal of memory. Across the continent, in the places where the guild's erasure had been most profound, strange things began to happen. In the malarial swamp that had once been the Whispering Valley, a group of imperial surveyors saw a shimmering, ghostly apparition of the ancient, humming stones appear in the twilight mist. In the northern mountains, a young shepherd, a descendant of the nomadic tribe whose migration path had been severed, began to have vivid dreams of a great herd of deer, dreaming a history he had never known. The ghosts of the erased cultures were beginning to bleed back into the world, drawn by the resonant call of Rhys's map. The land itself was beginning to remember. The Empire responded with a new, more brutal phase of its project. If they could not erase the memory from the map, they would have to scour it from the land itself. Legions were dispatched to the haunted regions, not to conquer but to sterilize. They burned the swamps, clear-felled the ancient forests, and salted the earth where the ghostly apparitions were reported. It was a new, frantic, and bloody war, a war not against people, but against memory itself. From his tower prison, Rhys watched the pyres burning on the horizon. He had not saved the cultures he had tried to restore. He had, in his attempt to make them remembered, made them a physical target. His rebellion had turned a silent, ink and parchment genocide into a very real one of fire and sword. He spent his final years filling his prison cell with maps, but he was not trying to find a solution for Lord Vane. He was creating a final testament. He drew the world as it now was, a palimpsest of truth and lies, of memory and erasure. He mapped the burned zones of the legions and the faint, glowing lines of the ghosts they were trying to extinguish. His last act was to create a different kind of map. Using his own blood as ink, he drew a single, small chart on the back of one of his official parchments. It was not a map of a place, but of a principle. It was a diagram of the Great Table, the Vellum Anima, and the Sepia Umbra. It was the schematic of the weapon. He entrusted this final, desperate message to a young, sympathetic guard, a boy whose own family had been resettled during the pacification of a haunted swamp. The guard escaped the city, carrying Rhys's final warning to the world. Rhys himself was found days later, having faded away in his cell, his life's work complete. The official cause of death was recorded as cartographic exhaustion. The official history of the Empire records the late 18th century as the Age of Consolidation. The Haunted Lands crisis was framed as the final heroic suppression of savage, deep-rooted superstitions that threatened imperial unity. Lord Vane was celebrated as the great visionary who had brought the entire world into the light of a single, rational, and unified map. The Royal Cartographers Guild became the most powerful and feared institution in the Empire, its authority absolute. Rhys's ghost map remained a permanent, silent fixture in the sealed revision room, its resonant hum a quiet, cancerous secret at the heart of the Empire's power. The Great Table was never shattered. The Guild simply learned to work around the ghosts, to incorporate the cartographic anomalies into their new maps as unstable territories or regions of historical significance, a way of domesticating the horror, turning a scream into a museum label. The guard who escaped with Rhys's final diagram became the founder of a secret society known as the Keepers of the True Chart. They were a scattered network of scholars, exiles, and descendants of the erased tribes. They could not fight the Empire's legions, but they could fight its great lie. They dedicated themselves to preserving the real maps, the real names, the real stories. They became a living archive of the worlds the Guild had tried to murder. For centuries, they worked in the shadows, a quiet, intellectual resistance against a power that controlled reality itself. Rhys's legacy was therefore twofold and tragic. His rebellion had failed to save the cultures he championed, and had in fact accelerated their physical destruction. But his ghost map had created a permanent, undeniable flaw in the Empire's perfect system. It was a wound that could never heal, a constant reminder that the world they had built was a lie, drawn over the bones of a truer one. And the science of cartographic extinction was not forgotten. It was refined. Other empires, seeing the terrible effectiveness of the Guild's work, began their own, subtler programs. They learned that you don't need alchemical ink to erase a people. You just need to control the schools, the publishers, the storytellers. You rename their mountains, redesign their flags, rewrite their histories, and within a few generations the work is done. The erasure is silent, and the victims themselves are taught to celebrate their own oblivion as progress. The great silent war between the mapmakers and the mapkeepers, between the erasers and the rememberers, never ended. It simply became the quiet, constant background hum of history itself. The battle for the world was not a battle for territory. It was, and always has been, a battle for the map. The Guild of Cartographers did not fall with the Empire. It evolved. The great table of obsidian was replaced by the server farms of silicon. The Sepia Umbra ink was replaced by the clean, efficient logic of code. The work of erasure is now more subtle, more total, and infinitely more elegant. You are living on a map drawn by a new guild, a map where the territory is not the land but your own mind. They are not erasing mountains and rivers. They are erasing context, nuance, and memory. They are redrawing the borders of your history, your identity, and your very perception of reality, one algorithmic adjustment at a time. The unstable territories on their new maps are the inconvenient truths that don't fit the approved narrative, the complex ideas that are too problematic for the clean, simple world they are designing for you. Rhys's rebellion teaches us the most important lesson. You cannot fight the map on its own terms. A direct assault only makes the system stronger, more ruthless. The true rebellion is not to draw a new map, but to refuse to recognize the authority of theirs. It is to become a keeper of the true chart. This means you must become a cartographer of your own soul. You must seek out the old names for things. You must learn the history that has been deliberately erased. You must find the stories that are not on their approved reading lists. You must, in short, draw your own map of the world, based not on the reality they present to you, but on the truths you discover for yourself. This is the only way, to create a chart of your own so dense, so rich with memory and meaning, that their sterile, empty map cannot find purchase. It is time to make your choice. Will you live within the borders they have drawn for you, or will you draw your own? In the comments below, it is time to make your declaration. A vow to become a keeper of the real. State it twice. I draw my own map. I draw my own map. This is your first act of true cartography, a declaration that your world is your own. If you are ready to continue this work of discovery, to learn how to read their charts and how to draw your own, subscribe. Activate the notification bell, for the work of erasure is constant and quiet. Share this with one other person who you know is tired of living in a world of blank spaces. They have handed you a beautiful, simple, and elegant map. We are here to show you the worlds they erased to make it, and to hand you back the pen.